everyone, this is Nicole from the Research Like a Pro question and answer series, and today we're talking about how to filter Airtable to view relevant clues for research planning. So the question that brought this up is kind of this idea of what is the best way to pull out the most relevant clues for research planning in my Airtable timeline when I have dozens of entries. So in the Research Like a Pro process, you gather all the known information into a chronological timeline, and then that helps you as you're research planning. But in the research plan, you need to draw out the most relevant clues. And you do this to really help you get in the frame of mind for what you need to search for in your research plan. And so listing the known facts in either a bulleted list or a narrative paragraph or even a table can really help you get those clues into the forefront of your mind. And the known facts for your research plan should be clues that are the most relevant to the research objective. And sometimes there will be conflicts about, when a person was born and that kind of thing. And you can focus on those original sources and those with primary information if possible. And you don't have to resolve all the conflicts, but if you do have like an obvious piece of information that's from, like a secondary informant created years later, and that one doesn't seem as likely as a conflicting piece of information that was from a primary informant, then you could just select the primary informant to be the clue that you include in your research plan. Although you may just want to include both because both might guide your research and help you know which one to test, and just figuring out what sources to search to either confirm or reject that piece of information. So what I'm going to show is that in Airtable, you can create a field for a checkbox. And then when you're going through your timeline, you can simply check that box to select the data to include in your research plan summary of known facts. You can also do this for a report or anything that you need to remind yourself that you've chosen something or selected it. This is so helpful to visually see what facts you are including, and then you can also use that field later to filter and just see the selected or checked rows. Then you can even take that view of those selected rows and export that selection of data to Word using either copy paste or a screenshot, which you then use AI to help you generate a table with. For an example, let's do the research question of who was the father of James B. Harris, born in 1819 in Kentucky and died 13 April 1899 in Chickasaw Nation, Indian Territory. I took a picture of his grave when I visited Love County, Oklahoma, and this is that picture. So you can see J.B. Harris as he's listed there and his birth and death dates. So in my Harris KDP base, I wrote my kinship determination project about his son, and so I included a lot of details about James B. Harris as part of the proof of his son, John Christian Harris, to his father, James B. Harris. Well, if I want to then use this timeline about James B. Harris that I already have in Airtable to then go forward with a new research project, I can look at the timeline that I have here and maybe select out the facts that I already have that will then help me to plan the research about who his father was. So I added a new column. So as you can see here, there's a new column called known facts. That's a checkbox field. And then I put the description in for the field, whether or not to include in known facts for research question about James B. Harris's father. And as I was going through, I realized that my timeline, I needed some of the fan club information. So I also added a lookup field from the research log to show the fans associated with that detail. And the way you do this is by going to the linked field for source and then right-clicking on that and choosing Add Lookup Field. And then this is the screen that pops up. And so any of the fields associated with that row in the research log you can turn on as a lookup field. So I turned on the fans and then I added that as a field. So now that I can see the fans, I can go through and check the box for what to put into my known facts in my research plan, just based on looking at the clues that I have here from the fans and the event details and what information might be relevant to figuring out the father of James B. Harris. Now, I already had some hypotheses in my mind. I knew that he lived near his sister, well, hypothesized sister, a woman named Sarah Ralston, whose husband Matthew Ralston was a consistent associate of James B. Harris in his land records and a neighbor on the census records. So I had kind of this idea that Sarah Harris, who married Matthew Ralston, Ralston was the sister, and we know her maiden name from the death certificate of Sarah and Matthew Ralston's daughter. So that's the first row. And I did check the box next to that one because it's an important clue that Sarah could have been his sister and they lived near each other. I also have James B. Harris's birth date of 1819 and then the birthplace of Kentucky from the 1850 census. So I checked all of those as important facts to include in my summary of known facts. Then I have his migration from Kentucky over to Cooper County, Missouri, where he patented land and then got married to Martha Hooser and then moved to Texas. And the final important detail that I wanted to include was the fact that James B. Harris resided in Milam and Williamson County, Texas in 1850, and that one of his neighbors was Matthew Ralston, and James was living in dwelling 78, and then in dwelling 92, there was a man named John Harris, and he was 49, so he was 20 years older than James, who was 29, and so he was old enough to be the father of James, and since he was living not too far away, then I thought that was a good hypothesis to pursue that he could have been the father of James and possibly the father of Sarah. So I checked all of these facts, and then the next step was to create a new view. So we were currently looking at the view of James B. Harris, and then I opened up the sidebar by clicking on the stack of lines next to James B. Harris, and then clicked on Create New Grid View. It doesn't say view, but these are the types of views you can create. And I always just create grid views because I just want to create new tables and not calendars or galleries or things. So I wanted to create a new grid view. And then once I clicked that, then I could filter to just see that information I had selected. So I gave this view the name of Summary of Known Facts, James B. Harris Research Plan, and then I went up to the filter and I changed the criteria for the filter to be where known facts is checked. So once I have that, then all of those rows that I had checked the box in are now appearing in my view, so I can easily see the details that I felt were most important for my research plan about James's father. Then I can go ahead and remove any fields that I don't need, so I can get this ready to be imported into Word as a table that it won't be too wide to view in Word because my research plan is a Word document. So I want to get this table into a format that's a little more narrow and not so wide like a spreadsheet. So I'm going to remove from this view any of the columns that I don't need. And mostly I just need the source citation and the details and probably the fans and the date and the place. So those are the main things I left to be viewed. Then I could kind of change the height and width of the columns and rows so that I can see everything all in one nice view there. And then I took this screenshot and I copied and pasted it into AI. So I asked Claude to create a simple table from the screenshot that I can paste into a Word document. I wanted 3 columns, the date and place in one, the details in the fans in another, and a source citation in the third. It then took all of the details from the screenshot and put it into a table. And for some reason, it made the details and fans a really skinny column. And I asked it to make it wider, and it said, you can do that when you paste this into Word. So that was funny. But it did make a simple table with all the information easy for me to put in. And then I pasted that into Word, and then an easy way to adjust the columns is to click on that top left button to select the whole table, then right click and then choose Distribute Columns Evenly. After doing that, everything was evenly distributed, and I could then see all of the relevant data for my research plan on one simple table that fits on one page of my Word document. So this was helpful. The only thing that wasn't preserved was the formatting of my citations, so I would have to go through and italicize all of the publications like Family Search and Ancestry. But I probably could have, if I would have caught that, done this in AI and had AI do it for me to make it italics. Then I thought, well, this is nice, but sometimes it's easier to digest the summary of known facts if it's written out in paragraphs and sentences, which AI is really good at doing that. So let's see if AI can write this out for me. So I said in the prompt on the side, now write narrative paragraphs from this table showing important clues for research planning with this objective. And then I gave it the objective. Then I said the narrative paragraph should include the clues from the fans and discuss connections between Sarah and her husband Matthew, associates of James, and that she may have been James' sister, and the fact that John Harris may have been James' father due to living in proximity in Milam in 1850. Using the citations in the table, put footnotes in Markdown for pasting into Word. So on the right, you can see version 11 of this artifact, which is what the kind of the worked product they call in Claude here on the right, whether it's a table or something that Claude is helping you write. And so the first few versions were the tables that I adjusted a little bit, and then the next few versions were the narrative version. What's great about Claude is you can go back and see all the versions if you want to and use those. So originally the markdown for the footnote formatting was formatted incorrectly, which happens a lot with AI. So I just gave it an example of what the footnote markdown is supposed to look like, and it fixed that. And so then it showed the footnotes correctly and also was able to paste them correctly into Word. I liked the writing that Claude did, but it didn't really sound like something I would write. So I probably wouldn't actually use this, but it was helpful in brainstorming and thinking about how to write about this. And because it's all formatted for me after I paste it into Word, I could easily adjust it and remove the fluff and the inferences that Claude made and just leave the main known facts behind so that it would be kind of more in my style. But it did a good job drawing out the connections and the clues that I had seen from my timeline and putting everything together into sentences. I then used the Writage plugin, which is a plugin I use with Word, and clicked on this paste markdown button at the top on the ribbon, and then the paragraphs from Claude pasted easily into Word, and then I could do my further editing here to get it the way I like it. So that was a simple way that we can take what's in Airtable, select it, filter it down to a specific view, and then put it into our research plan, whether it's in a table or in paragraphs. So to wrap this up, it can help you to stay focused on the evidence as you go through Airtable and select which pieces of data you need for your research plan. And you don't need to include every detail that you have. That's always there in Airtable for you if you need it, but for getting started with your research plan, it's good to just focus on the most important evidence that leads you to your hypothesis. And just remember that good research planning starts with identifying your strongest clues. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you learned something about Airtable-based filtering, creating views, and using AI to help with table creation.